new time now, Mondays at 5 p.m. It's very exciting. Lots of changes going on. And thank you for tuning in. Very excited to have my guests on the show today. And big welcome to you in the studio here today. I'm
Thank
excited to talk
you.
about this because of a few different reasons, um, which we'll get into. The one of them being that I was actually born at home with a midwife.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about Black and Brown health in communities. And shout out to Miami Community News for having us on the show today. Thank you all for tuning in. Make sure to start your watch parties. I'm starting mine right now. And chat in your questions live for us on the show. So for years, Black women have been disproportionately dying during and after childbirth, if you guys are not aware. And this is due to systemic racism in the medical system here in the United States. The Southern Birth Justice and the National Black Midwives Alliance, which the organizations you're involved with,
Hmm.
you've been making progress in this, you're creating and sustaining community centered solutions, training, deploying doulas, training
Hmm.
midwives, reviving this culture, this long lost knowledge. And it's just a really, I'm honored, kind of a little nervous to be in the presence of such a strong, amazing woman who's literally bringing life into this world on a regular basis.
Mm.
So, welcome. Thank you for taking the time, Jamarah.
Jamarah,
Jamarah.
but you can call me Ja. Everybody calls me Ja.
Ja.
Yeah.
Okay, Jamarah Ja Amani. Thank you so much. I feel
Yeah.
like we really need to give you a round of applause,
Oh, thank
for
you. That's
real.
beautiful. I'm
No,
honored to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
so tell us. So I talked a little bit about what the organizations that you work with do, but why don't you tell us a little bit about you? Like, who are you? How did you get here? Where are you from?
Okay. Well, my name is Jamarah, and I am a midwife. I'm a community midwife in Florida. I'm a licensed midwife, and I'm also a mother of four. So I came to this profession really through my own birth experiences. I have a strong background in activism since I was a teenager, and just through my own pregnancies, kind of seeing some of the challenges that Black women have to face. And then also, learning more about the statistics, Black women being 3 and 4 times as likely to die from childbirth related causes as our white counterparts. It just really made me want to do something. So I got involved with birth justice, which is really a framework that was birthed right here in South Florida. And at Southern Birth Justice Network, we are the architects of birth justice. And what it really means is that everyone should have a provider that meets their needs, that respects them, that educates them about their birth options, that upholds informed decision making, and make sure that healthcare is a partnership and not that it's something that's being done to you, as we often see in hospitals. And also, part of that work is really uplifting the stories of Black families and of Black midwives. As you mentioned, some of these are traditions that have been lost, but not lost in the sense of, something random, but Black midwives were systematically disenfranchised all across the South in particular. And so part of the work is really bringing that legacy back into the community by increasing the numbers of midwives, by raising awareness that, Black midwives exist, that we're here, that we're doing the work, that we're caring for our communities.
Mm-hmm.
And, we're also involved in training and mentoring of students as well. So yeah, that's what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. What is the reasons that you think that birth rates, women are dying in this way? Is it is it the doctors, they're not being educated? Is it that they are afraid to have uncomfortable conversations with their patients because they don't know how to have, conversations with people that look different from them or whatever, whatnot? What is it?
I mean, there's a lot of reasons, and as we see with most, forms of oppression, even when we talk about this pandemic that we're in right now with COVID-19, the reasons are intersectional, and they're varied, right? So there's not just one reason; there's multiple ones. But the major thing is systemic racism, as you mentioned, and the impact that that has, both on the individual and on within the system. So there's something called the life course perspective, which is, basically this theory that if you're exposed to racism and white supremacy over the course of your life,
Mhm.
it accumulates as stress in the body, and it can show up as a higher blood pressure. You have
Mhm.
higher cortisol rates. We see
Mhm.
higher rates of preterm labor and higher rates of birth related complications. So that's how it impacts the individual. And then within the system, there is ongoing discrimination. We have, care that is substandard. We have obstetric violence happening in hospitals. We have a
Ooh, well,
rising
I don't know what that word
C-section
means,
rate.
obstetric, but it sounds scary.
Obstetric violence basically means, so birth is a natural process, right?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Pregnancy and birth is a natural process. And when we uphold the natural processes, it respects the rights of the individual. But when things are forced on people, like an unnecessary surgical procedure or intervention,
Mhm.
then it can become, a situation of violence. And so a lot of people are having C-sections done without their consent, or they're being coerced into them.
Mhm.
In South
Mhm.
Florida, in Miami-Dade County, we actually have a almost 50% C-section rate. And we know that the World Health Organization recommends a 10 to 15% C-section rate for a healthy society. So that means thousands of people are having surgeries that are not necessary. And some of that does relate to the education of doctors. Some of that relates to the way the system works. And some of it relates to, pre-existing conditions and substandard care and complications that arise because people didn't have access to care in between their pregnancies or before they got pregnant. So we don't have expanded Medicaid in Florida.
Mhm.
We don't have extended postpartum coverage in Florida. So people are not getting adequate care or for long enough, or from providers that listen to them and respect them. So, and of course, this disproportionately affects Black people, and
Mhm.
that's why we see those high rates of mortality, which are devastating to families that it happens to. And also, we have the high infant mortality rate, where Black babies are twice as likely to die in the first year of life. So, we talk a lot about the problems and about the statistics. And what I really want to focus on, as we, move from just being focused on what's wrong
Mhm.
to what can we do,
Yes.
is the solutions. And we know that from research that midwives and doulas are really solution oriented. And when midwives and doulas are integrated into the healthcare system, we see outcomes improve.
Mhm.
And that's because the care is more holistic, it's more individualized,
Okay.
it's more respectful.
Yeah.
And when people know their rights and they can advocate for themselves, and they have a provider that respects them, you're going to see more quality care. You're going to see more shared decision making when it comes
Mhm.
to, okay, we have a complication or we have a situation, what needs to happen next. You see more people birthing at home and in birth centers because they choose to, and because their insurance covers it, and because they feel like that's the best place for them to be. And in Florida, we're really blessed because we do have insurance coverage for home birth and birth centers. So that's a really amazing thing and a huge step that Florida has taken to, ensuring reproductive health for all of its citizens. So, one of the things I want to highlight is the documentary that we're making about Black
Mhm.
midwives,
Mhm.
because
Very exciting.
yeah, I hope you get a chance to watch the trailers.
I haven't watched the
And
trailer yet, but I'm going to.
please do. You can find them at legacypowervoice.org. And we're having a screening of a short segment of the film this Saturday, virtually, of course, at on December 12th, Saturday, December 12th at 7 p.m. And we're going to have a chance to have a panel of midwives. And these are grand midwives, what we call our elders. We call them grand midwives,
Mhm.
who have been practicing, some of them 30, 40 years, doing, home births and caring for people in holistic ways. And we're going to have a panel where they are going to share some of their wisdom. So I'm excited as somebody who learned from these grandmothers, these grand midwives, to, be able to sit at their feet and soak up some of that wisdom, because it's a channel that has really been lost in our communities.
Mhm.
That midwives are not the central healthcare providers for pregnancy, birth, postpartum, infancy anymore. You kind of have to like search out a midwife versus, we used to have so many midwives
You
that
know one,
they were
yeah.
the main channels for communicating health and taking care of families within the Black community. And so our work is really to restore that legacy and to move that forward by increasing the numbers of providers. So this documentary is helping to raise awareness and share those stories, and tell tell everyone about the beauty and the legacy of Black midwives.
Mhm. Very good, very exciting. Um, I wanna talk a little bit about organizations, companies, brands, people that either have been a direct barrier or direct supporters of your work.
Mm.
Do you have anybody in mind that we should know about? Especially we just came out of an election.
Hmm.
Like who is for this kind of work and who should we be aware of that is not?
Well, what we need is a birth justice report card
Okay.
so that we can really get a sense.
And this is a state thing or a federal thing or a county, city?
Well,
What?
we've been working on a county birth justice report card that we want elected officials to fill out, as well as hospitals at Southern Birth Justice Network. One can go to our website, southernbirthjustice.org, and download that. And it's really a tool, it's an advocacy tool. Individuals that are giving birth can use it when they go to their hospital or birth center. Doulas can use it when they're advocating for their clients. And what we really want is for hospitals, local hospitals, to adopt the Birth Justice Bill of Rights,
Mhm.
and to recognize it as, we recognize that these are rights of people
Yeah.
who are giving birth in this facility.
Put up the posters in the health centers of all of the
Absolutely.
things.
And we want to start with the Jackson hospital system, because that's where most of people in Miami give birth.
Okay. And then what about hospitals? Are they required to have a doula or a midwife on staff?
They are not, but that is a great idea. They should be
They
required.
should be required.
Right now, doulas are not even allowed to go into hospitals to support their clients because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So many doulas are providing virtual support.
Uh-huh.
But conversely, a lot of people, as midwives, we've seen our practices, many of my colleagues and myself have seen our practices double and triple because there are
Yes.
more people seeking to have birth
Yes.
outside of the hospital,
Of course.
because they're not letting the doulas in, and also because people don't want, the exposure
Yeah.
to COVID. If birth is not an emergency, right? If it's a natural event, if we know that it can be cared for holistically in a home setting,
Yeah.
if you're a healthy person, then there's no reason to go to a hospital unless you are having a complication or an emergency. So a lot of people are choosing out of hospital birth, which is either a birth center or home birth, because that is, they feel, the best option for their families. And so that's why we at National Black Midwives Alliance, really want to increase the numbers of providers so that that opportunity can be available to more families.
It's amazing work that you're doing. Um, as I think about when I'm going to have, hopefully, if I'm blessed, babies one day.
I
Uh,
want to know your story. You said you were born at
yeah, I was
home.
born at home. My mom, strong woman, my godmother and my mother's midwife, Paloma. She
Mm.
was there and brought me into the world. Apparently I was screaming really loud. I wasn't pleased. And actually I've been
We love
thinking,
screaming babies.
yeah,
That's like a
it's
health. Babies
healthy.
come out screaming, you're breathing, you're healthy. Awesome.
Yeah. I've been thinking a lot about this whole concept of the, birth in the womb and stuff, because the culture I'm building at my brand is, our mission, and I'm thinking about our vision and what we envision for the world, and people feeling safe. This concept of people
Yes.
feeling safe. And I'm like, dude, the safest place, the most safe place you've ever felt for sure is when you're in your mom's womb, like you feel so safe in there.
Yes.
Like strive to achieve that level of safety and comfort.
I love that you brought up safety. It's such an important conversation.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of people don't feel safe in their healthcare.
Yeah,
And
it's
so,
scary.
yeah, I mean, and I think that particularly Black moms, that what I see when I am taking care of Black moms, a lot of times when they come in for their prenatal visits, if there's been a recent police shooting or, an instance of police brutality that's high profile, their
Hmm.
blood pressure's higher,
Of
or they'll tell
course.
me they're not sleeping. And so we have to think about how all of these issues are intersectional
Hmm.
and what kind of
Exactly.
protective factors can we put in place for
Right.
our communities. And traditionally, midwives have been that safe space where people go to that they can feel heard and understood and listened to and advocated for. And so, that's why it's so important, I think, particularly for pregnant people, because they're not only worrying about their own health, but the health of their baby.
Hmm.
To have that safe space is such an important thing.
Hmm.
So I'm so glad that you brought up that issue of safety. It's so paramount to good health.
It is. Well, okay, if again, just to remind and recap, disproportionately due to systemic racism, Black and brown people are dying during and after childbirth at like alarming rates. This is a fact. If you can just Google it, like it's actually like pretty much no knowledge at this point.
Hmm.
But if those that are feeling compelled or upset by this knowledge, they're just
Mm.
now starting to become aware and woke to it, how do they support your work in your organization?
So
Or
definitely support Black midwives, support Black doulas. You can make a donation at southernbirthjustice.org. You can become a monthly sustainer. We have that option on our page. Please support the making of this documentary, Legacy Power Voice Movements in Black Midwifery. You can find out more information at legacypowervoice.org. As I mentioned, we're having a screening this Saturday of a short segment of the film and a panel of midwives. So please attend 7 p.m. Eastern Time on Saturday. You can get your tickets at legacypowervoice.org. And then lastly, at blackmidwivesalliance.org, you can support National Black Midwives Alliance. We provide mentorship to future Black midwives, to students, and also scholarship opportunities. You can become an ally member even if you're not a midwife, just to support the work, and that's organizations and individuals. So
Mhm.
there's lots of ways to support this work.
Well, thank you so much. It's really been honoring and I'm humbled to meet you and talk to you. Thank you for all the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much. This was fun.
Yay. Great. So now we're going to continue on to talk with my next guest, continuing to talk about health today. It's an important thing, especially with COVID, just all the time. We're in the open enrollment for Obamacare, and I'm really excited to welcome to the show Lorena Tomasini. She's the co founder of Malm Insurance, and she's also the host of 12 Minute Talks podcast. She's a Miami girl. She's a sweetheart. She's a friend of mine, a colleague, and I'm so glad that you made time to come on today. I haven't seen you in forever. How are you?
I'm doing good, Miriam. Thank you so much for having me here today.
Yes, yes. Um, Tell me a little bit about your work.
Sure. So I co-founded MALM, a life and health insurance agency, together with my mom. And what we do is we really help the community here learn more about how they can financially protect themselves
Mm-hmm.
in different scenarios, right?
Okay.
That come along in life a lot of times, and people are just not prepared for it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So all different types of insurance beyond health insurance.
We mainly focus on life insurance and health insurance.
Okay.
We
And
don't
if
do property and casualty and
okay.
cars and things like that.
And I want to just circle it back, be real with people because we talk, we follow each other and such, and you're like, hey, you saw that I was doing the show. You were always so supportive of everything that I do. And you're like, hey, we should talk about what I'm doing on the show. And I was like, yeah, I do. I want to bring in the show, but hey, the show is about race to the top, Black and brown communities, etc. And I was like, so how are we gonna, talk about that? How are we gonna make it relevant? And you really responded with some interesting things. And I said, okay, absolutely. Let's bring Lorena on to talk about it. So tell me a little bit about some of the things that relative that you're aware of in Black and brown communities and the health statistics that are affecting us.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a topic that we hear about often, but
Mm-hmm.
so like statistically speaking, according to the American Heart Association, um, the African American community is at a higher risk for heart disease.
Mm-hmm.
And, this is due to pre existing conditions of high blood pressure, diabetes, obesity, right? That's higher in that community, right? Um, whenever I have a client that they tell me that they have diabetes, my immediate follow up question is, oh, do you also have high blood pressure?
Mm-hmm.
Because there seems to be a combination, that I've noticed from that. So one of the things that I do in my field is in my industry is really educate the community about how they can be prepared. Because if we're talking to somebody that has high blood pressure, we know I always joke around that high blood pressure is like a side effect of living in Miami, right? Just traffic alone, people have high blood pressure,
So
right?
real.
And Ja that was here before was talking about women that are, that live in an African American community that they're more higher propensity for high blood pressure, right? Because
Right.
of circumstances and so forth. Um, so one of the things that I do is we talk a lot about like critical illness insurance, which is really to provide people with money if, God forbid, they have a diagnosis of cancer, heart attack, stroke, that are things that happen and nowadays because people have access to more affordable health insurance. They're more aware that, hey, I have this pre-existing condition, but they're not really preparing themselves financially for if that were to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just a way of having a lump sum of money if somebody has a heart attack or has cancer, because the likelihood of surviving that nowadays is a lot higher than, like 10, 15 years ago.
Right.
Usually that would be like a death sentence, having a heart attack, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's definitely one of the things that we do.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so this is for people that don't necessarily have health insurance through their work. So
Hmm.
entrepreneurs, people that are working at a smaller business, they don't offer these types of coverage and stuff.
Right.
Then we come to Lorena, and luckily you're so sweet and you explain it all to us.
Hmm.
And then we pay like a monthly fee or whatnot, just like we would normally.
Yeah,
Excellent.
exactly. Yeah, and those are very simple to qualify. It's not, very complicated. Hmm.
Okay. And then talk to me the other point that you made when we were talking about having you come on.
Hmm.
You talked about the health statistics of affecting African American communities, heart disease being much higher. You've talked about the breast cancer, Black women,
Hmm.
the higher rates of death, um, and what people can kind of do to become financially prepared should they become diagnosed. But what about this other point that you made about leaving a legacy for your family and increasing the racial wealth gap? Because that was another one that you mentioned. I
Yeah.
was like, well, let's talk about that.
Yeah, I often hear about the racial wealth gap,
Hmm.
and through documentaries and stuff, I'm like, wow, I didn't think about that. Like, that back in the day, it was harder for people of color to buy homes in certain areas, right? So that already there creates a gap and, everything else. So I've been doing insurance since 2006. And
Hmm.
when I first started, I worked a lot in Miami Gardens, in North Miami. So I know from personal experience who buys more life insurance and who doesn't, right? So, from my personal experience, right, I've noticed that African Americans tend to buy more life insurance than whites, right? Hispanics also buy life insurance, not as much. But um, one way to increase the wealth gap is through life insurance because um,
To decrease it, right?
to increase.
You want to
Oh, I'm sorry,
increase it.
decrease,
Okay, I'm like,
decrease
wait
the
a minute,
wealth
wait.
gap. I'm sorry.
Gotta back it up. We didn't want to increase the gap.
we wanna make that shorter.
Exactly.
But one affordable way of doing that is through life insurance, right?
Okay.
Because I often see that people they just want to buy enough for like final expense, which is like to cover their burial or their cremation, which is good because you're thinking about that burden
Right.
for your family, right?
Yes.
But instead of just getting a $20,000 policy, you could get a policy for 200,000, 500,000, $1 million, right? And that entire benefit would go to your family tax free. at least here in the state of Florida.
So what age do, oh, it's tax free here.
Yes. So
Fantastic. I
any
freaking love
benefits
this
you
state.
receive, yeah.
So at what age do I get my health life insurance policy?
That's a good question.
18?
You can start at 18. You know, some people like to buy it for children. There's different reasons for that. But the younger you are, the more affordable it is, right?
Of
So
course, exactly.
if you're 20 something, 30 something, you can get 1 million in coverage very at a lower rate, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
And you don't
obviously
tell
for
people
health.
that you get it because then they might. Yeah. I'm just
You
kidding. That's
know,
a horrible joke.
you know that is not, that's a funny joke, and
It's
I've
not
heard that
funny.
from clients myself.
Don't tell anybody. Just
But
get your insurance and don't tell a soul.
you know, I've had people say,
Don't
hey,
say
you
who.
know,
I
but
don't. Who's on it? Who's named on it? No one knows who the
yeah,
beneficiary is.
somebody has to know where that policy is, right? At least the beneficiaries, you know.
What about your
Um,
executor of your estate?
exactly, them too. But you know, the other thing with life insurance is that it also helps to avoid probate. So if you're a business owner,
Mm-hmm.
right, and you have a business, well, you should also have a life insurance so that if you pass away, who's going to take over that business and
Mm-hmm.
everything like that. And this also avoids probate. So whoever you designate as a beneficiary in that life insurance, that's who's going to receive the funds. That's not going to go to court. And now let's see, it's not a will,
Right.
right? It's a contract. Um, and so yeah, so definitely life insurance is a great way to decrease the wealth gap, right?
Yeah.
Um, and
And as
you
I could,
know,
it's
also for
also
charities.
something that people who are compelled right now, part of the movement, if you feel like, wow, I've really been privileged throughout my life, maybe consider signing your life insurance policy, a portion of it or whatever, whatnot, to someone that has been a victim of systemic racism in the United States of America. Let's start realigning these gaps with every single thing that we
Right.
can do. That's the kind of the sacrifices that I would like to see from people who say, oh, I'm woke or whatever, and da da da. Okay, well, let's
Where's
see
the
the life
action?
insurance policy documents. Start signing it over, like give
Yeah,
some property
well,
away.
definitely, because you can designate a charity as a beneficiary,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you can have, you know, more than one policy if you want, one for your family, have another one for the charity, or split it, right? You
Yeah.
can do whatever you want with that. So yeah,
Listen,
that's
everybody call
definitely
up
great.
Lorena, get a policy, and donate it to someone that looks
Yeah.
like me or.
There you go. You know, I always say people that like to like tithe at churches, I think
Mm-hmm.
that's great, but I always think when that person passes, that money's not going to be there for that church, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a very easy way to leave the funds. Hmm.
Excellent. And it's very important to kind of think about these kind of things right now during this time of year because of Obamacare and what is
Yeah,
the issues, the
the open
deadlines.
enrollment period for
Okay.
health insurance, right, which is a great way to look at, hey, what pre-existing condition you might have, or preventive care, which is really important. That ends now in December 15th.
Okay.
So
It's
we
right around the
have, you
corner.
know, a few days to get that done. And it takes me literally 5-10 minutes to get some information from the person and give them a quote. And that's all based on income and the family size. So I always say, don't go based on what you hear out there in the news, your friends, your neighbors, right? Really make an informed decision for you and your family, because that's what it's about at the end of the day, you
Yeah.
know? Hmm.
So, how can people get in touch with you about
Sure.
this
So the
important
best
stuff?
way is they can call me or send me a text at 786-236-1792, or they can visit my website at www.malmins.com.
And it's a family owned company too, right?
Correct. I work together with my mom.
I love
Hmm.
that. I want to
Yeah.
meet her someday. Well, thank you, Lorena, for coming on the show today. And thank you all for tuning in. Thank you to Miami Community News for sponsoring this program. And please come back. We're Mondays now at 5 p.m. Next week, we're chatting with RJ Wolf and another amazing guest, Ketchy, who you guys might remember from earlier in the show. Thanks so much. Have a great day.